Hi, welcome to another exciting episode of the Andre The Beast Crayton Show. Today, we're going to talk about shame, guilt, and fear. Let's call it the fear factor. A lot of us deal with it every single day, but we don't know why we deal with it. And more importantly, we don't know how to overcome it. And on top of that, we don't know what happens in the process of dealing with these things. Today on the show, we have a beautiful young lady that has witnessed all of these categories and has had an astounding revelation of self-worth, self-identity, and more importantly, she's understanding her purpose. I'd like to welcome to the show all the way from Connecticut, the one, the only, the beautiful Kerri Ann. Welcome to the show, Kerri.
Thank you for having me. Super
Such a
excited to be with you today.
off camera, you share a lot of information of trial, tribulation, and overcoming. Before we get into your story, tell the viewers a little bit about you before we get into your actual journey.
So I'm 49. I had several spiritual awakenings in my life, and which has really led me to a process of learning to face darker emotions and to be able to surrender those dark emotions. And it's really just a process of surrender that has really brought me to higher levels of consciousness.
When did these? What were some of the things that you mentioned that you was dealing with such things as fear, shame, and guilt? What were those three categories? And give a little bit of explanation about the fear, the shame, and the guilt that you was dealing with.
Well, there's tons of fear and shame and guilt that we build up in our system. And I like to look at it as like a jar. And if you picture your body as a jar, you over through your time, if you don't process your emotions, you create these marbles in the jar of fear and guilt and shame and anxiety, all the things.
Mhm.
And until you face those things and pull those marbles out, you're not able to come to oneness with yourself and experience the light within you. And spiritual awakenings, in my life have kind of purged that and vaulted me into states where I was able to purge a lot of those things.
But what were those things? You we mentioned them, but what were they? What were you?
There's so many. I mean, I've had the fear of being seen. I've had the fear of, choosing the wrong religion. I've had shame around my body. I used to be a size 20. I've had, guilt of not doing the right things, of, not moving in the right direction for people. I've had, shame of, you know, I mean, there's just so many things that build up, I had social conditioning around, working all the time. And like, the harder you work, the more you're going to earn. And it's just so many. We build up so many of them.
What was the ones that you had that troubled you the most out of all of those? You mentioned being overweight. I guess that's what that means. Being overweight. You mentioned spirituality. Let's talk about those two things. What was that? How did you overcome those two things? And what was the things that were that when you talked about spirituality or the church, what were the things that you was questioning?
So I grew up in a household of really of Christianity, and I kept trying to please my family and please my father into, reading the Bible and to being what they wanted me to be, and believing that I needed to be that way. And it wasn't until I finally broke free from that and said, you know what, this does not resonate with me. This doesn't feel right in my body. And then I was able to start journeying into different, modalities to figure out what really resonated with me, what made sense to me, what felt good in my body.
What wasn't resonating with you? Because you're talking about a religious sector that's been around for a long time, and now you're questioning it. What wasn't resonating with you, and what was being forced upon you?
When I before my spiritual awakening, and I've had several, it was that was really big with my family was reading the Bible and following those teachings. And after my spiritual awakening, I tried to read the Bible and it just wasn't resonating with me. I was feeling a lot of fear around it. And so I started to look internally instead of externally. And I started to meditate and I started to gain answers to a lot of my questions just through sitting in stillness and allowing those thoughts to release and to watch those thoughts go by, and found peace there. And now looking back on it, I don't have anything against Christianity. I don't have anything against the Bible, and everybody has their own way. And I think there's beautiful things in the Bible, but it's just not my way.
Mhm. You mentioned body imaging and
Mm.
overweight. Explain that part of your journey.
Well, for years, I mean, even when I was a little girl, I would be overweight and then I would go to the gym and I would do all these things and, try to eat better. And then I would lose all this weight and then I would go and back, gain the weight back again. And it was this constant flip flop back and forth. And it wasn't until later on in my spiritual development that I understood that there was an energetic vibration that I was experiencing, and it was an attachment to the food, and it was an attachment to shame, and it was attachment to guilt, that I was able to notice the energetic vibration in my body and witness it. And once it's witnessed and loved and felt complete and full, you feel it completely and you open your heart to it, it then releases. And once I started that practice of every time eating and, noticing that energetic vibration that was attached to that,
Mm.
and I started to practice this in my life, was when I was able to release that. But I will say there is a level of consciousness that I did have to come to, and through meditation be very aware of my body and how my body feels, to understand and feel those finer vibrations and energetic pulls to the food. And that has worked in multiple ways in my life, not just through, not just with eating and losing weight.
Where did the guilt come in for you?
I think when I would feel levels of guilt is when I would go and eat the food. So it's kind of like, we all have these, things in our life when we're not feeling good, we go and we eat the food, or we go and do smoke the pot, or we go and have the drink, or we go and do whatever. It's all different levels of suppressing what really needs to be felt and seen.
You mentioned being afraid to show who you really was. What were you
Oh
afraid
yeah.
of? What were you afraid of showing? Explain that. Explain that a little bit.
Well, there's been in my life in particular just so much of perfectionism and always feeling like I wasn't pretty enough or good enough, or I didn't have, the right words to say. And, I think with um, all of those things were blessings to show me higher levels of consciousness, but I had to look at them and I had to feel what that felt like in my body and accept the feeling in order for the feeling to be released.
You dealt with 10 years of self growth. Why 10 years?
Massive growth.
Why 10 years?
Well, that was 10 years ago, was actually really I call it my first spiritual awakening, was actually my second spiritual awakening, because I had a Kundalini awakening when I was a little girl. But 10 years ago, 10 years ago really catapulted me into realizing that the Bible, particularly in Christianity, did not resonate with me. And so I started to really seek out what it was for me that I believed. And I started learning and getting my hands on books and different podcasts. And I started to go towards what made sense for me in my life. And then those teachings helped me to understand how I needed to work with myself and my body in order to release all of those feelings of shame, guilt, fear, all the feelings.
What were you gravitating to? What you mentioned what felt comfortable to you. What did feel comfortable to you? Because if you're unaware of something, how did you recognize that this was the path that you needed to follow?
So I got into non-dual devotion when I had my spiritual awakening. I had read a book years prior. I was really into Oprah Winfrey, and she suggested a book called Awakening to a New Earth by Eckhart Tolle. And I read the book and I had no idea what it said. And it was like, I never read, and I was like, I'm going to read this book. I'm going to do it. And I read this book from front to back and had no idea what it meant. So I put the book away. And when I had my spiritual awakening, the first thing that came to my mind was this book. So I ran all over my house looking for this book, and I read the book again, and I knew exactly what the book meant. And I started practicing what Eckhart Tolle had taught, which brought me down different teachers. And I would listen to the teacher, and if I was gaining knowledge from it and starting to use some of their modalities and they felt good in my body, that was the direction that started to like lead me down different paths. And then I got on to non-duality, and just recently kind of really dropped that as well. And my practice now really is, my biggest practice is meditation, gratitude, yoga, and really being aware of the present moment and how my body is feeling at all times. And when an emotion arises like that fear, guilt, shame, I then stop and I feel what it feels like in my body. And then I open my heart to it and accept that the feeling is there. And I understand that it's there to teach me a lesson.
Mm.
And I'm able to allow that feeling to like come over me and through me in my body. And it creates an opening inside of me. And once that is seen fully with your heart open to it with love, it's then released. And it's this practice that I keep doing over and over and over again. And it's really fear, shame, and guilt, and all of those things are just energetic vibrations that we have from this life and past lives that we still need to work through. Like even before this podcast, when we were talking about karma,
Mm.
it's just levels of energetic vibrations that need to be seen, because the way I see it is God is unconditional love. And I think a lot of people would agree that God loves unconditionally. So when you can love unconditionally, all of those things, fear, shame, guilt, that come into your body, and open yourself up to them and see them and be fully seen and loved, is when they release, and they release and your body opens, and you just keep practicing this over and over and over again, and these higher levels of consciousness start to appear.
Mhm.
And you just keep doing this practice all the time, but it's a lot about being conscious and being present, and meditation helps with that.
You mentioned that you had your first encounter with this as a child. Explain what that was like.
So that you got cut out there. Can you repeat that?
I said you mentioned that your journey started as a child. What was that like for you as a child, and what actually took place at that time?
So when I was a child, my father, my father came into his rebirth or awakening. And during that, he was listening to an evangelic preacher on TV. And I was watching it intently, and it really touched me. I was like 10 years old, sitting on the floor, and I was really listening. And all of a sudden, I got hit by what felt like lightning. And I jumped up onto my dad's lap, and I said to my dad, I said, "What just happened?" And he said, "You were touched by the Holy Spirit." And I didn't think anything of that. And years later, I have come to understand that I actually had a Kundalini awakening.
What
But
exactly
during
is
this,
that? What is a kind of linear awakening for the
a
viewers?
Kundalini awakening is when you feel like you've been hit by lightning. It's this massive surge of energy, because everything is energy that comes up and through your body, and it clears out a lot of those dense emotions like the fear, shame, and guilt, and all of them. And it helps clear that up and out. And then once I had had that experience, things started happening where I was naturally seeing dead people and light beings and all of these things that were happening around me that I really didn't understand.
Did you share that with anybody?
Not when I was a kid, no. Not when I was a kid.
Did any of those miracles diminish as you got older?
They did. Yeah, they did. And I didn't share those things because I had levels of shame that I needed to process through.
Mm.
And it wasn't until recently where I started to really be open about that. There are some beautiful light beings that are around us. And recently I also got very into the angels and archangels. And I connect deeply with a whole team of archangels that really just, when they come into my life, which they're here daily with me now, they bring this massive amount of love and nurture to me.
Why do you think they're with you, and why aren't they with everybody? Because if we're talking unconditional love, and if the universe made all of us, why isn't everybody else feeling, going through, or feeling what you're getting the experience?
I think a lot of it is that I've processed out so much shame, guilt, and all those things. I think there's a level of that to it. But I also, when I was going through a period of very, very, a lonely period in my life, I started to reach out to the angels, and I started to ask them over and over again to be present in my life. And I'm talking, I mean, there was times where 3 times a day I would call and ask for their assistance. And it was a practice really that I started. I think I know that the angels will be there for anyone, but you have to ask, and you have to thank them for being with you.
How do you know
And
they were? How do you know they were with you? Like, what was going on in your life that you called upon the divines to come and intervene, and you saw their work firsthand? Give me an example to the viewers.
I was going through a really dark period of time in my life. I had just gotten divorced. I was starting to date and experiencing a lot of narcissistic tendencies in the people that I was dating.
Mm.
And I had also separated from parts of my family. I had also separated from parts of my, a lot of friends in my life, because they were friends that I was with when I was married and those kind of things. And I had gotten into this state of like really feeling alone. And it was the constant um, asking of the angels to come in and be there for me. And now they're my family. They're my family.
So what you're saying, I mean, try to get some clarity to the viewers. The angels
Yes.
came in and start removing unwanted resources from your mission, basically is what it boiled down to, or put you in a situation to start removing negative energy so you can start receiving positive energy. Am I getting that correct?
I have removed negative energies through a process of unconditionally loving those energies and allowing those to really feel and see those energies.
Mhm.
But I think what happened was is because I've processed out so much sheer, fear, shame, and guilt that I started to remove people from my life that weren't serving me.
Mhm.
But it did bring me into a state of loneliness. And during that loneliness, I started to call in those angels. And then I was starting to see synchronicities of other angels wanting to be part of my angelic team. So I would like listen to something and they would mention a certain angel and I would say, is this angel an angel that wants to connect with me? And I would get a feeling in my body. And if it was a good, tingly, wonderful feeling, then I would start to call them into my angelic team. And so daily, if not, I mean, I live with them all the time. But I'm always calling them in. So I would say that if anybody wants to experience angels in their life and archangels, it's a matter of just picking one or two angels. And it's a process of constantly asking them to come into your life and being grateful and knowing that they're there. And the more that you process out some of those denser emotions, you start to feel them.
How do
And
you
then
know?
huh?
How do you know? Who do you know? How do you know who to call? You mentioned several angels. Like, who are these angels, and how do you contact them? Is my question.
So I started with, I started, yeah, I was talking about how I've learned all these different teachings, and Archangel Michael was something that, I would listen to, a podcast, or I would listen or see or read, and Archangel Michael's name kept coming up. And it was Archangel Michael that I really started with. And it's really just a matter of just, basically what I just do is I just say, Archangel Michael, just come into my life and be here for me, lead me, guide me, let me feel your presence. And thank you for being here. And even if you don't completely feel them right away and you start this practice over and over and over again, they start to reveal themselves to you. And then they start to communicate with you. There's an angel, Metatron. This angel is hilarious. He is hilarious. And every time he comes into my life, it makes me laugh.
Who is
He
this?
tells
Who is
me,
this angel?
Metatron.
Megatron.
Mhm.
Okay, so they
Yep.
tell you their names as well.
They will tell you their names and their energy presents themselves to you. When you get really in tune with energy and the way that you feel in your body, they start to come in and you can start to feel who's who and you can start to feel their energy. And like I was saying, like some of them are funny and some of them are very serious and stern and some of them are more powerful than others and you can start to feel their energies come into your body.
So what's their purpose for humanity? You've been blessed with these gifts and now they're starting to resurface, but what is their purpose in as it relates to humans?
For me, Their purpose is to allow me to feel one with creation, to know that there's a higher power, that they give me comfort and peace and levels of love that I don't think I could experience on my own. Because when their love comes in, it's almost overwhelming, and you have to like relax into it because the love that they give you is so profound.
Is my question is, where was you were married and you have children? Where was your support group from your husband as you going through the fear, the guilt, and the shame before the transformation? What was his role in your life?
Well, I mean, that's really why we separated. During that 10 years, so I had had my spiritual awakening, and we were married for another 9 years after that. And during that time is when I was doing all this spiritual growth, and there was a level of knowingness that I needed to separate from him in order to transcend myself into uh, another level of consciousness, and that his energy was no longer resonant with the energy. My energy had changed so much, I couldn't ascend further without separating. And I actually had a really good marriage. We're still friends. I still love him to death. There was no real abuse there or anything. It was a matter of me evolving and him not really.
Why didn't you? Why didn't he want to evolve with you? Is the question. If the marriage is good, why didn't he, as your significant other, why didn't he want to experience the journey? And did you try to get him to experience the journey?
Oh, for 9 years, for 9 years, it took me 9 years to separate from him, even though I knew right after my awakening I needed to do that, because I loved him so much, and he was in fear of it. There was fear, and it's so funny because now, since we're no longer together, his awareness has increased as well. There was a level of codependency in our marriage. There was a lack of balance. And not that he was right or wrong or I was right or wrong. It just wasn't equally yoked, so to speak.
When you say codependency, elaborate on that. You guys were both codependency on each other.
Oh, absolutely.
What was that like?
Um,
Explain that a little bit.
we had a level of love and protection with each other. And it was a safety that we were feeling together to, it was almost like oh, how do you put that into words? It was always like a safety that we felt till the separation, that I realized that the love doesn't come from another person. The love comes within yourself and self-love. And until you can truly have self-love and real love for yourself, is in my understanding not in is in my understanding, until you have that love, you really can't love another.
Mm.
And so it was this constant, gripping of each other and loving each other, rather than really looking within and looking at yourself for the love that you really need.
How did your
Wholeness.
how did your transformation affect your children? Because you don't want to always empower them with your beliefs. You kind of like, you you watch over them, but as they get older, they come into their own. So, how has your transformation affected the growth or your children right now?
So when I was growing up, and when my father had his rebirth, he was constantly preaching to me about his beliefs. And his beliefs were that if I didn't follow things in a certain way, that I was going to burn in hell. And that's where so much fear had come over me with Christianity, and because of his teachings with me. And so, as far as my children go, what I do is I don't preach to them my beliefs as much as showing them. They see what mommy does. You know, they see that I give so much gratitude daily. They see that I meditate daily. And it's interesting that you asked this question, because during my second spiritual awakening that I talk about 10 years ago, not the Kundalini one, my son, as a small child, came to me when I was in a state of bliss. And he looked at me and we had a conversation, and his eyes shifted in a really crazy way. And I always was like, wow, like what was that all about? And then now going forward, he's really like in tune and has this higher level of consciousness
Mhm.
that he shows me every once in a while. That comes out. He's 13 now. Um, but I really think that there was a shift that occurred in him because he was experiencing me in this higher bliss state.
Mhm.
And I noticed that even with myself, that my eyes have changed throughout this process of cleansing, clearing, and surrendering to these emotions, that my eyes have gotten bluer and that the intricacies in my eyes have changed. And what brings me to that is the saying that the eyes are the window to the soul. And so it's been very interesting with me and in eyes, you know, like paying attention to my eyes.
You've been through a lot. You've conquered the fear, the shame, and the guilt.
Maybe not all of it, but I'm working at it.
What do you take away from all of this? What do you take away from it? Looking back now, what do you tell yourself if you had to turn back the hands of time?
I'm right where I need to be now. Life is a journey. And I do have, if I could tell myself back then, I would say just keep seeking. Seek and ye shall find.
How can the viewers reach out to you, support your cause, and you're getting ready to, in the future, launch your own podcast and so forth? So you're really gonna resonate this message of journey. Let's call it the journey. How can the viewers reach out to you and support you and follow you on this journey?
So I'm on Instagram, YouTube, mainly a little bit of TikTok, but using my name, I think on YouTube I'm at Kerri Ann, and on Instagram I'm underscore Kerri Ann. That's KerriAynne. And yeah, I would love, you know, if you resonate with my messages in any way, I would love to see your beautiful presence on my pages for sure.
Tell me a little bit about the podcast that you're getting ready to try to launch. What is that? What is the meaning behind the podcast, and why start one? For the viewers can understand why, what your message is.
My message is that we are all perfectly imperfect, and that the journey can look so different, and that it's through meditation and practices that you can really open your conscious awareness and feel oneness with not only being on the planet, but oneness with other experiences that you can't typically see with your eyes, but you can feel with your heart. And it really helps you when you expand your consciousness. It helps you to love people unconditionally more and more and more as God loves you.
What kind of what individual? What is the perfect individual that needs to listen to your message?
anyone that is looking for ways to expand into higher levels of consciousness within them. Anyone that is experiencing a lot of these denser emotions that we talked about, like fear, shame, and guilt, and learning to work with those in a way of surrender to have freedom from what I would call energetic vibrations or darker energetic vibrations.
Wow. Leave the viewers with that beast mindset that you deal with every single day that keeps you going.
What keeps me going is a profound amount of self-love that I have found for myself. And it's really just one step at a time. It's really one step at a time in the journey.
Kerri, and thank you so much for taking time out to share such a beautiful story. I wish you the best. I know your podcast is going to definitely resonate to a lot of individuals. Make sure you guys subscribe and like and support her. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been another exciting episode of the Andre The Beast Crayton Show.